Howdy, my name is Homer. Tell me, guys, do you have a favorite drink? How is it, and why do you like it? It can be anything. For example, water, apple juice, or even mulled wine. Write here in the comments under the video about it, and I'll tell you about my favorite drink. I will say at once that the repetition of my habit is dangerous for you. Why? You'll find out now. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. It was like this. When I was born, my parents were prophesied that I should be a special child. I do not know why our relatives thought so, but in principle, they were right. It's all about my body, but I'm not like everyone else. I'm just a little bit different from you, I'm sure. Why? You'll find out now. Yes, I did not finish. At first everything was normal, usually. I grew up and learned to walk, eat, hold a spoon, then became even more mature and went to school. And one day, I got really sick. I was terribly tired. I didn't want to eat anything. I was infuriated by everything, and I began to lose weight rapidly. What only my mother did not invent, horror. She dragged me to hospitals, even tried traditional medicine. My father brought me my favorite snacks and sodas after work, but my body refused to take them all. My parents were almost desperate, because it had already been 4 days, and I didn't eat anything, only occasionally drank water. Then my father was advised to take me to an old elderly doctor who lived very far from our house. That old man had a lot of experience in medicine, just in the field of children, and my mother did not hesitate, took me in his arms, and he and my mother took me to him. On the way there, Dad remembered that he didn't fill up the car, and we stopped at a gas station. As soon as Dad started refueling, I suddenly smelled such a delicious smell, like sniffing the most delicious burger on earth. I wanted to smell it and smell it. I even opened the door slightly and stuck my head out. My mother was surprised and asked what was the matter. I almost didn't have the strength to speak, and all I said was that I liked it. My mother opened her eyes wider and opened the door even more for me. As soon as Dad filled up, he closed the doors and we left. Mom asked Dad if he could smell food nearby, but Dad shook his head. I made a face, like I want that smell again. Dad turned the car around and we went back. I opened the window and got high again. Suddenly Mom says, he likes the smell of petrol. Dad couldn't believe it, but it was true. I liked the smell of it. We stood there for 20 minutes and then I had the strength. I asked for a burger. We stopped at a cafe and ate, and I felt better, but not for long. We decided not to go to the doctor. My parents decided that everything was fine and we returned home. At night I woke up with a familiar feeling of hunger, but I didn't want food. I wanted to smell the petrol. I got out of bed and went to my father's garage, opened the tank to where my father kept a little petrol, and began to smell it. I felt better again, and then I wanted to taste it. I know you're going to wince. It really was very bitter with a bright smell. I took a very small sip and felt strange. There was a feeling that I had flown somewhere, as if my head was spinning and I was all so light. I had pictures in my head and the feeling that the whole room had been turned upside down. After lying down for 30 minutes, I realized that I was much better and I went back to bed. The very next day, the previous illness seemed to have disappeared. I started going back to school, socializing with friends, and eating normally. Of course, I didn't tell anyone about my oddity, so that no one would think I was a drug addict. Well, then I had another attack of hunger and irritability. Without hesitation, I went to the garage and took another sip of my drink. I even laughed at myself that I was a living car that didn't go without fuel. I felt dizzy again and lay on the floor, and then I came to my senses and went on with my business. So a couple of weeks passed, and then I began to notice that my attacks became more frequent, and if earlier I drank my favorite drink only 1 time a day, now it's twice. It became more difficult for me to explain to my parents where I was and what I was doing in the garage. I was tired of coming up with excuses. In the end, I poured some into a bottle and hid it in my room so that I could drink it without going out. Did I think it was dangerous? Undoubtedly, but on the other hand, I could not do anything about my need, because it had become vital. Eventually, after another week, my throats got bigger, and at dinner, my father asked me where all his gas had gone. I said I didn't know, and then I ate. Suddenly, before going to bed, my mother came into my room and smelled the smell of fuel. I had just taken a sip and was lying there so relaxed. She screamed at the top of her voice, and I couldn't move. Looking at the picture, I'm lying on the bed and I can't say a word. Next to me is an empty fuel bottle and a screaming mother. Suddenly I felt so funny. I was lying and laughing, and my mother called an ambulance and my father. The doctors came quickly, took me away on a stretcher, and then I suddenly felt bad. I felt a sharp pain in my stomach. The whole body seemed to hurt from the inside. I couldn't understand why, because I was supposed to feel better? When I arrived at the hospital, I started to panic. And what if I die? What have I done? Why did you drink petrol? But why did I think about it only after so much time? All of a sudden, I felt like guilty myself, my parents, and I wanted to apologize, but I couldn't say anything. Doctors was confused, made me some injections, put on a mask, and then I became terribly nauseous. In general, there is a very unpleasant story happened. I had a gastric lavage and could barely pump myself out. Then I slept for a few hours, and after sleeping, my mother and the doctor stood next to me. She was crying so bitterly, thinking she was going to lose me. I wasn't the only one surprised by what the doctor said. I was shocked by his theory about why I started drinking petrol in the first place and why I didn't like normal people. It's all about my naturally arranged body. No, I wasn't a born drug addict. Listen up. Somehow, when my mother was pregnant with me, she was under a lot of stress. It seems that my grandfather died then. She was very worried about this, and all this affected me. It wasn't noticeable at first, but as my mother says, I always had some need to calm down. Here, for example, when I was very small, I constantly demanded breasts. Then, as I grew up, toys of certain colors. Then I had an interest in stationery. They had to be the same size. That is, if the notebooks are the same, it calmed me down, and then everything passed in the transition age. My parents breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that everything was over, but they were wrong. It was only a respite. A few years later, it caught up with me again. I was looking for something unusual in my subconscious that would distract my stressful body from external factors, and just my parents and I went to the gas station. Yes, the smell of fuel turned out to be a new thing for me, which is not particularly found in everyday life, given that I do not have frequent contact with it. I set myself up for the fuel to help me and tied myself to it. Well, then my strong body demanded more and more of it, until I ended up in the hospital. I asked the doctors why I didn't get poisoned, but this mystery remained unsolved. I was lucky, that's for sure, but if only a little bit more, probably would not have been saved. The thought gave me the creeps. What a fool I was. I almost killed myself. Well, as for my condition, in which I am looking for a need for something, my mother is already looking for a specialist to help me deal with the problem. In the meantime, we try to turn my attention to more pleasant and useful things, sports. My father signed me up for a gym and gave me a swimming pass. Since I already have so much energy, it is better to direct it in the right direction. I was glad that I had another chance to start a new life, and now I knew for sure that I would not give in to questionable desires. My life is more precious to me. In general, such are the cases. And what do you think? What else can I do to occupy my brain and instill useful habits? Give me some good advice, guys. Thank you in advance. And also, be sure to ask your loved ones for advice if you are drawn to something strange. Well, you never know.
I think many of us have some strange characteristics that we can't explain to ourselves or to others. Someone eats boogers, someone sits for hours in the toilet, someone likes to sniff gasoline, tear paper, and much more. For example, I like to eat soap. Yes, simple, ordinary, real soap for your hands, face, no matter. I have my own favorite tastes, colors, and firmness, and it started from childhood. By the way, my name is Mia. I have a little sister and a mother. My father was gone, and my mother raised us alone. She was often at work, I was at school, and my sister was in kindergarten. When I came home from school, I usually had lunch, then sat down for lessons. In the evening, my mother and sister came. The three of us had dinner, bathed, and went to bed. Since I grew up, I bathe alone. I always used soap and a washcloth. I was very attracted to the smell of scented soap. I remember my mother always bought it in bundles and said it was cheaper. We had soap at home with a smell of honey and milk, strawberries, herbs. They were all different shapes, colors, and frothed in different ways. And so, on one of these bathes, as I lay in the bathroom and washed my hands, I suddenly began to wonder what soap is made of. How do they make it, and why does it have such a beautiful foam? After a few minutes of reflection, the thought crept into my head. What does it taste like? I've often heard my sister say that she cries every time the soap gets in her eyes. Yes, it is really unpleasant. It stings the eye so that you think it is about to fall out, and when it gets into the mouth, it becomes disgustingly bitter and disgusting. But I do remember that I got foam in my mouth and I properly soaped my hands and licked. The taste was really a little bit bitter and sour, but interesting, not like anything else. I licked the foam again, and the more I tasted it, the more I liked it. Then I decided to take a bite. This small piece stuck slightly to my teeth. I even had to pull it off with my tongue. It reminded me of toffee candies, but I realized that I liked it. So I ate a little of it and left the bathroom. I knew I shouldn't tell anyone, especially my mother. She'll yell, I thought. The next day, I repeated my dessert. With each bite, I liked it more and more. I couldn't eat much, but one bite was just the thing. It was like an addiction, a soap addiction. Since then, I've tried a lot of different types. Most of all, I like the smell and taste of honey, coconut milk, and chocolate. I also like these products very much. Once I decided to experiment and tried shampoo and shower gel, but it was not delicious. Then I heard my mother talking to herself in the bathroom. What's wrong with the soap? Why does it end so quickly and why are there teeth marks on it? Mia, don't you want to tell me anything? My mother asked sternly. I was confused, but there was nowhere to go, so I confessed everything. Just like that, Mom was yelling. She told me to stop this strange habit. What? There's nothing to eat at home but soap? Who eats it at all? She shouted. I didn't understand why it made her so mad. I didn't eat much, just one bite. But then I came up with a plan. I just bought a separate one for myself and hid it in my room. After a shower, I went to bed, and before going to bed, I took a bite and went to bed, savoring a piece. I will say it right away, I did not have a stomachache from it, and I did not go to the toilet with bubbles. Everything was as usual, just like everyone else. Then I grew up and went to university. Since it was located in another city, I had to rent an apartment with my friends, classmates. The three of us lived in a one-room apartment. The area is small, but it helped save money. The girls did not know about my habit, and I also carefully hid this fact from them so that there would be no unnecessary questions and ridicule. Like at home, I went to the shower, took my soap with me, bathed with another, and then bit my own and went back to the room. But one day, we were doing general cleaning and a friend was cleaning the closet. When she reached my shelf, my honey fell out. She picked it up from the floor. At this moment, I screamed, and before I could run up, she asked me why there were teeth marks on the soap. At that moment, I blushed terribly and didn't know what to lie about. Another picked up the subject and began to laugh wildly. What are you doing, eating soap? I was so confused that I could not lie. They began to laugh out loud, clutching their bellies. Well, then came a lot of questions. After I told them everything, they didn't believe me for a long time. To be honest, I was joking, but do you really eat it? The girlfriend asked. It was too late to deny it, so I took my soap and took a bite in front of them. What do you feel? They asked. I replied that at such moments, I feel the same as when eating. Everyone has their favorite dishes. When you eat them, you feel pleasure, happiness, bliss. In a word, high. So am I. I'm just getting high. What if I spread it on bread? One asked. And then she made me a nice little sandwich. She cut the soap into thin layers and put it on a piece of rye bread like butter. I took a bite and ate it. I liked it, but without the bread the taste is brighter and more pleasant. While I was chewing, they both stared with their mouths open and were gawking at me. I was very funny and I suggested that they try it. They took a millimeter at a time and ran to the bathroom. They spat so that the whole entrance seemed to hear them. Ugh, it's bitter! It's disgusting! How do you eat it? They both shouted. But no one can understand my preferences, so I kept it a secret. Since that day, on my birthday, every year the girls have given me whole packages of my treats. I didn't even know there were such tastes. Then I began to eat handmade soap. It was a little greasier than usual, but even more delicious. You will probably think that this is nonsense and that this does not happen. But believe me, there are still so many inexplicable habits in the world. Perhaps not everyone is talking about it, but I decided to tell you about this so that you don't think they're alone. But it turns out that my habit has a name, allotriophagy. This is when a person eats inedible things. I found out about it when I got to the hospital. It happened a couple of years later, when I had long been eating not one piece per night, but much more. I didn't have to hide it from the girls now, so I ate whenever I wanted and as much as I wanted. So one day, I felt a sharp attack of pain in my stomach. I thought it made my legs go numb. I was brushing my teeth before going to bed and suddenly doubled over. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't call for help. I was just gulping air like a fish on land. And then I deliberately pushed the shampoo shelf to the floor. The girls came running. They barely broke down the door and saw me almost blue on the floor. The ambulance came for me. At the hospital, when I came to my senses the next day, I was told the name of my addiction and I was warned about its consequences. It almost cost me my life. Since that day, I've been trying to hold back. It was insanely difficult at first, and then the girls came up with something. Now we only have liquid soap in the house.